And I wished I had siblings. I would have loved to have had siblings. That's why I'm so excited to be pregnant, so that Archie has someone. It was really interesting the last time I saw her must have been at least 18, 19 years ago.
A secret DNA test. Results were so explosive, Meghan did everything to destroy them. But she failed. Prince William just got his hands on the evidence, and what he saw made his blood run cold. And the truth that's been hidden for years is finally coming out. What do those test results actually say? Who's been lying this entire time? And why is Meghan absolutely terrified right now? For months, Meghan Markle chose silence. While speculation grew and headlines multiplied, she remained quiet, watching from a distance as rumors about a royal DNA scandal began to spread across media outlets and social networks.
Ago, personally encouraged the co-founder of Sony to open its first European factory here in Wales. That decision wasn't simply an investment. It was an act of faith in the ingenuity and spirit of this nation.
The silence was not accidental. Those who observed the situation closely understood that Meghan's lack of response was deliberate, a calculated decision rather than an inability to speak. In the world of public relations and royal protocol, silence can serve many purposes. It can be a shield, a strategy, or simply a way to avoid adding fuel to an already burning fire. The rumors themselves were never based on concrete evidence. There was no official statement, no verified document, and no confirmed source. Instead, the scandal emerged from whispers and suggestions that seemed to originate from within palace circles before being picked up and amplified by tabloids and online commentators. The questions being raised were deeply personal and potentially damaging. They touched on matters of royal bloodlines, inheritance rights, and the legitimacy of Meghan and Harry's children. Yet none of these questions were asked directly. They were implied, hinted at, and left hanging in the air, just long enough to create doubt. Doubt, as many public figures have learned, can be more destructive than outright accusations. An accusation can be denied, disproven, or challenged in court. Doubt, however, lingers. It spreads quietly, requiring no evidence to sustain itself. And when left unanswered, it begins to take on a life of its own. This appeared to be exactly what was happening as the DNA scandal gained traction throughout the spring and early summer months. As speculation intensified, Meghan withdrew further from public view. There were no interviews scheduled, no carefully planned appearances at charity events, and no statements released through her representatives. Each absence became its own story. Media outlets began to interpret her silence in different ways. Some suggested she was overwhelmed by the pressure, while others claimed she was strategically avoiding the controversy. A third group of observers, particularly those with connections to people close to the situation, offered a different explanation. They suggested Meghan was watching carefully, taking note of every development, every claim, and every person who contributed to the narrative being built around her family. During this period, reports began to emerge about growing unease within the royal household. According to sources familiar with palace operations, there was increasing concern at the highest levels of the institution. Conversations that would normally remain private began to leak to journalists who cover the royal family. Phrases like unauthorized testing and breach of protocol started appearing in media reports, though always attributed to unnamed insiders. Meetings between senior royals reportedly grew longer and more tense. The usual formality that characterizes royal business was being strained by the controversy. For the first time in years, there was a sense among palace staff and observers that something had escaped the carefully maintained control that typically defines how the monarchy handles public relations crises. When rumors refuse to die down naturally, it often indicates that someone with influence wants them to continue circulating. This realization seemed to dawn on many people watching the situation unfold. At the center of the entire controversy, though rarely mentioned by name in early reports, were Meghan and Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet. Their identities and place within the royal family were being quietly questioned without anyone making direct accusations. The children became symbols in a larger battle about power, image, and the future of the monarchy. Despite the deeply personal nature of these implications, no evidence was ever presented to the public. No medical records, no test results, no confirmation from any credible source. The entire scandal rested on suggestion and repetition. Throughout all of this, Meghan maintained her silence. She did not defend herself, did not deny the rumours, and did not offer any explanation for why such questions were being raised in the first place. This absence of response had a powerful effect on public discourse. Social media platforms became forums for debate and speculation. Commentators on television and radio programs offered their analysis of what the silence might mean. Conspiracy theories began to multiply, each one more invasive and personal than the last. Photographers began capturing rare images of Meghan during this period. The photos showed a woman who appeared tense and guarded, her expression carefully neutral, her eyes focused straight ahead. She was almost always in motion in these images, walking quickly, avoiding prolonged exposure to cameras. Different people interpreted these images in different ways. To some observers, the photographs seemed to show the visible effects of pressure and stress breaking through her usual composure. To others, they revealed someone who was counting down to a specific moment, someone who knew exactly when and how she would respond. The tension continued to build throughout the summer. Royal watchers and journalists who specialize in covering the monarchy noted that this particular scandal had unusual staying power. Most royal controversies tend to fade after a few weeks when no new information emerges. This one, however, continued to generate headlines and discussion even as months passed without any development. The persistence of the story suggested to many observers that it was being deliberately kept alive through strategic leaks and carefully timed reminders. Behind the palace walls, the situation was reportedly causing significant strain on relationships that were already fragile. The relationship between Harry and his father, King Charles, which had been damaged by Harry and Meghan's decision to step back from royal duties, was said to be under additional pressure. The connection between Harry and his brother William, which had shown signs of deterioration in previous years, was reportedly growing even more distant. Communication between the brothers had become minimal, with most contact happening through intermediaries rather than direct conversation. Then, without warning, everything changed. Meghan Markle broke her silence with a statement that immediately altered the entire landscape of the scandal. The statement was not delivered through a press conference or a television interview. Instead, it appeared as a written post published simultaneously on her legal team's official platform and across all of her verified social media accounts. The statement was relatively brief, containing just 174 words, but its impact was immediate and profound. The timing of the statement's release was no accident. It was posted in the early evening, a moment when royal correspondents and news organizations were preparing their coverage for the following day. Within minutes of appearing online, the statement began to circulate rapidly. News alerts went out, journalists scrambled to analyze the wording, and the direction of the story shifted completely. This was no longer about speculation and rumor. Meghan had entered the conversation directly, and she had done so with force and precision. The statement Meghan released was brief but devastating in its impact. Within the carefully chosen words, one sentence stood out with particular force. The truth is not in your blood, it is in your actions. This single line, placed strategically in the middle of the statement, cut through months of speculation and rumor with surgical precision. Meghan did not mention specific names, did not reference particular incidents, and did not provide dates or details about alleged DNA tests. She understood that the power of her response lay not in confirming or denying the rumors, but in challenging the very foundation upon which they were built. The statement reframed the entire scandal. Rather than treating it as a legitimate question about biology or lineage, Meghan presented it as a deliberate campaign of fear and manipulation. She described the controversy as an orchestrated effort designed to undermine what she and Harry had built together. The language she used was sharp and deliberate, carefully crafted to avoid legal liability while still making her position absolutely clear. She never mentioned Camilla by name, and she did not need to. The implications in her phrasing were strong enough that readers could draw their own conclusions. Perhaps the most significant element of the statement was a reference to a senior royal with a vested interest in rewriting legacy through lineage. This single phrase ignited immediate speculation across every platform where the royal family was discussed. Within an hour of the statement's release, journalists and commentators were attempting to identify who Meghan might be referring to. The ambiguity was intentional and effective. By not naming anyone specifically, Meghan allowed the palace and the media to speculate endlessly, which only amplified the impact of her words. Camilla's name emerged first in these discussions, given her position and her complex history with the royal family. King Charles was also mentioned, though less frequently. Some fringe commentators even suggested that Prince William might be the target of Meghan's veiled accusation, though this theory gained less traction. The beauty of the statement, from a strategic perspective, was that every guess sparked new theories, created new divisions, and generated more coverage. Meghan had thrown a match into dry kindling and then stepped back to watch as others tried to control the resulting fire. Behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace and other royal residences, the reaction was one of shock and anger. According to sources with knowledge of the palace's internal operations, senior staff members were caught completely off guard by the boldness of Meghan's statement. One aide was reported to have said that she had broken unspoken rules that govern how members of the royal family, even former working members, engage with public controversy. The statement violated the traditional approach of never complain, never explain that has guided royal communications for generations. The palace had relied on the assumption that Meghan would either remain silent or respond through carefully worded statements that maintained plausible deniability. Instead, she had shattered that wall of ambiguity. There was no more room for polite nodding or strategic silence. The challenge had been issued directly, and everyone inside the palace understood exactly what it meant. This was no longer a public relations problem that could be managed with the usual tools. This was an open conflict. By midnight, on the day the statement was released, reports began to surface that King Charles had convened an emergency meeting at Clarence House. The meeting was small and private, with only the most trusted individuals in attendance. Prince William arrived quietly, using a side entrance to avoid photographers. Camilla was also present, and according to sources, she made no attempt to hide her fury at what she perceived as a direct attack on her position and reputation. The message Meghan had sent was received clearly, and no one in that room mistook it for anything less than a declaration of war. The atmosphere inside the meeting was described by those familiar with it as extremely tense. Voices were raised, though the specific content of the discussions has not been disclosed. What is known is that the palace immediately shifted into crisis management mode. Calls were made to legal advisors, public relations consultants, and trusted media contacts. The goal was to contain the damage and control the narrative before it spiraled further out of their grasp. While the palace scrambled to respond, new information began to emerge from an unexpected source. An anonymous whistleblower from a high-level genetics laboratory in California came forward with documents that suggested the Day scandal was not merely theoretical. According to this whistleblower, whose identity has been protected under legal safeguards, the laboratory had received sealed DNA samples for testing several months earlier. The samples had arrived under a pseudonym, a common practice for high-profile clients seeking discretion. At first, the laboratory staff treated this as a routine case. However, certain details about the samples raised concerns among the technicians who processed them. The documentation that accompanied the samples included names that should never have appeared on a testing requisition of this nature. According to the leaked documents, the samples were labelled with two names that sent shockwaves through anyone who understood their significance. One sample was identified as belonging to Archie Harrison, Mountbatten, Windsor. The other was labelled with the name Charles Philip Arthur George, the full name of the King of the United Kingdom. The implications of these revelations were staggering. If the documents were authentic, it meant that someone had arranged for DNA testing to be conducted on the King and his grandson without public knowledge. The laboratory flagged the results as containing what they termed a confidential anomaly, a designation used in cases where the genetic relationship between samples does not match what was declared on the paperwork. However, before the flagged report could be formally processed and reviewed according to standard protocols, something unusual happened. The data disappeared from the laboratory's computer systems. This was not a case of accidental deletion or routine file management. According to the whistleblower, the data vanished completely, requiring the kind of external intervention that suggested someone with significant resources and technical capability had intervened. The type of digital erasure that occurred is not something that happens by accident. It requires deliberate action and sophisticated knowledge of computer systems. Shortly after the results were marked for internal review, the laboratory received contact from someone identifying themselves as a representative of a client with connections to the United Kingdom government. This representative requested, though the request was phrased more as an ultimatum that all documentation regarding the samples be destroyed immediately. The tone of the communication made it clear that this was not optional. Internal emails that were later leaked to investigators revealed the level of concern among laboratory staff. One official warned colleagues that the file was radioactive and should be handled with extreme caution. The documents provided by the whistleblower revealed additional troubling details. The DNA samples had been routed through an address registered to a shell company located in Santa Barbara, California. This type of arrangement is often used by wealthy or famous individuals who want to maintain absolute privacy. The timing of when these samples were collected aligned closely with a period when King Charles had been visiting the United States for what was publicly described as environmental discussions and diplomatic meetings. The window of opportunity for covert sample collection was small, but it existed. Whether the DNA collection was done with the knowledge and consent of all parties involved, or whether it was conducted secretly, remains unclear. However, the existence of digital correspondence tied to the case painted a disturbing picture. Email threads revealed that a private investigator based in the United Kingdom had been hired months before the testing took place. This investigator was allegedly working for a client whose identity remained redacted in the leaked documents, but who had connections to British legal and possibly governmental circles. The involvement of a private investigator suggested that the DNA testing was not a spontaneous decision made in a moment of doubt. Instead, it appeared to be carefully planned and executed as part of a larger strategy. The question that began to dominate discussions was who had authorized this operation. Did Meghan request the testing to prove the legitimacy of her children? Did Harry arrange it out of his own doubts or fears? Or was there a third party involved, someone within the royal establishment who needed to confirm or challenge suspicions they already held? Each theory opened new wounds and deepened existing divisions. As media outlets on both sides of the Atlantic worked to verify the authenticity of the leaked laboratory documents, Buckingham Palace issued a flat denial. The statement was brief and unequivocal, refusing to acknowledge the claims or launch any investigation into the matter. The palace's position was that the allegations were baseless and did not warrant a formal response. However, this denial did little to calm the growing storm. If anything, the refusal to engage with the substance of the allegations only fueled further speculation about what the palace might be trying to hide. While the scientific evidence continued to circulate and generate debate, an emotional bombshell dropped that shifted the conversation in a dramatic new direction. Prince Harry, who had remained publicly silent throughout the escalating scandal, finally broke his silence. However, he did not do so through an official statement or a planned interview. Instead, a private voice recording, apparently meant only for a close friend, was leaked to the media and quickly spread across the internet. The audio clip was barely over a minute long, but its impact was profound. The voice on the recording was authenticated within hours by experts who compared it to known recordings of Harry's voice. What made the clip so devastating was not just what Harry said, but how he said it. This was not the polished, media-trained voice of a royal family member delivering carefully prepared remarks. This was the raw, unfiltered sound of a man in deep emotional pain, struggling to make sense of a situation that had shaken the foundation of his identity. The recording began with 7 words that immediately established the gravity of what followed. "I never wanted this, but I had to know." The statement was a confession, quiet and pained, revealing that Harry himself had authorized the DNA testing. He had not done so out of malice or suspicion toward Meghan, but out of a desperate need for clarity in a situation that had become unbearable. For Harry, the decision to seek DNA confirmation was not about questioning his wife's fidelity or the legitimacy of his children. It was about confronting doubts that had been planted in his mind by others and that had grown over time into something he could no longer ignore. In the recording, Harry spoke about years of subtle comments and insinuations that had gradually eroded his confidence. He mentioned how Archie's physical features had been quietly questioned in private conversations among palace staff and family members. These were not open accusations, but rather carefully worded observations that seemed innocent on the surface but carried deeper implications. He described how aides and relatives would make comments about Archie's eyes, his hair, his complexion, always framed as casual remarks but always leaving a residue of doubt. Throughout this period, Harry said he had been told repeatedly that he was imagining things, that he was being paranoid, that he should not let outside voices get into his head. This pattern of dismissal and reassurance is a classic form of psychological manipulation. The more he was told to stop asking questions, the more the questions consumed him. The gaslighting, as Harry seemed to recognize in retrospect, had worked for a long time. But eventually, it stopped working. The turning point came during a conversation that Harry was not meant to overhear. According to the leaked recording, he had been walking through a corridor in one of the royal residences when he heard Camilla speaking in hushed tones to a senior aide. The exact words were not clear, but the implication was unmistakable. Camilla had referenced a need to know what is true before he does, suggesting that there was information being gathered or investigated without Harry's knowledge. Harry never confronted Camilla directly about what he had heard. He explained in the recording that he did not need to confront her, because the tone and urgency of her voice, combined with the context of the conversation, confirmed what his heart had feared for too long. The realization that the truth about his own family was being managed, controlled, and potentially hidden from him was shattering. Harry went on to describe how Meghan had begged him not to pursue DNA testing. She had pleaded with him to let the matter rest, to focus on their life together and their children, and to not invite another battle with the institution they had already fought so hard to escape from. After everything they had endured, from relentless media persecution to being effectively exiled from the family, Meghan could not bear the thought of another war. But Harry, in that quiet moment captured on the recording, said something that revealed the depth of his internal struggle. "I could not live the lie, even if it broke her." This was not just about the DNA scandal. This was about Harry's fundamental sense of self and his ability to live with integrity. To continue without knowing the truth would have meant surrendering to the very system of secrets and manipulation that he had spent years trying to escape. For Harry, the cost of not knowing had become greater than the potential cost of finding out. The recording ended with words that ignited a global firestorm of reaction and debate. After a pause and an audible breath, Harry said, "If Archie is not mine, what does that make me?" The question hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity and its implications. Harry was not asking about his title or his position in the line of succession. He was asking about his identity as a father, as a husband, and as a man. The question suggested that Harry had reached a point where he genuinely did not know the answer, where the foundation of his family life had been called into question so thoroughly that he was lost. The public reaction to the leaked recording was immediate and intense. Social media platforms exploded with discussion, with people taking sides and offering their interpretations of what Harry's words meant. Some expressed sympathy for a man clearly struggling with profound doubts planted by a toxic environment. Others criticized him for allowing those doubts to take root in the first place, arguing that he should have trusted his wife unconditionally. Still others focused on the question of who had leaked the recording and why, suggesting that the leak itself was part of the ongoing campaign to damage Harry and Meghan's reputation. With Harry's emotional breakdown now public knowledge and the palace still reeling from the laboratory revelations, Meghan decided it was time to take control of the narrative once and for all. She arranged for a live-streamed interview that would be broadcast across multiple platforms simultaneously, ensuring the widest possible audience. This was not going to be another Oprah interview, carefully edited and released through traditional media channels. This was going to be direct, unfiltered, and global in its reach. The interview opened without any of the usual warm-up pleasantries or small talk. Meghan sat down, looked directly into the camera, and immediately established the tone of what was to follow. "I will not be bullied into silence," she said, with a calm that barely concealed the storm of emotion beneath. That opening line was a declaration of intent. The version of Meghan who had once tried to play by the palace's rules, who had turned the other cheek and hoped that silence would eventually lead to peace, was gone. This was a woman who had been tested, betrayed, and pushed to her limits, and who was now ready to fight back with everything she had. When asked directly about the DNA testing, Meghan confirmed that tests had indeed taken place. The confirmation itself was significant, removing any remaining ambiguity about whether the scandal had any factual basis. But what followed was even more striking. When the interviewer pressed her on who had authorized the tests, Meghan paused deliberately, letting the silence build tension, before responding with calculated precision. "That is not a question I need to answer," she said, "because the point is not who requested it. it is who feared the result. The response was perfectly calibrated to redirect attention while simultaneously intensifying curiosity. Meghan was not going to play defense by explaining her own actions or Harry's decisions. Instead, she was putting the focus squarely on the motivations of those within the palace who had created the conditions for such doubt to exist in the first place. This was not just strategic communication, this was a complete reversal of the power dynamic that had defined the scandal up to that point. Meghan then revealed something that stunned royal watchers and casual observers alike. She claimed that the idea of DNA testing was not a recent development, that it had been floated years earlier when Archie was still an infant. According to Meghan, a senior member of the royal family had raised questions about the baby's appearance shortly after his birth. The questions had started subtly, with comments about hair texture, skin tone, and eye colour. Then Meghan said, came a question that no mother ever forgets. Have you considered confirming his bloodline for clarity's sake? She did not name the royal who had asked this question. She did not provide the exact date or location of the conversation. But the damage was done. The implication that someone within the family had questioned Archie's legitimacy from the very beginning reframed the entire narrative. Meghan was not finished. She shifted the conversation away from genetics and towards something she argued was far more significant, which was the fear that drove the entire scandal. There is a reason some people in that palace fear the bloodline truth, she said. Because if the truth challenges what they have built their legacy upon, they lose not just power, but the illusion that protects them. Her words were sharp and unapologetic. She was speaking not just as a mother defending her children, but as a woman who had survived what she described as the darkest corners of the institution. She went on to accuse members of the royal staff, and by implication, certain family members, of orchestrating a long-term campaign designed to destroy her credibility and fracture her family from within. She described a pattern of character assassination that included whispered rumors that somehow found their way into tabloid headlines, private details that were leaked and then officially denied, and offers of protection and support that never materialized when they were actually needed. Meghan painted a picture not of isolated incidents or misunderstandings, but of a systematic and deliberate effort to push her and Harry out of the family while maintaining the appearance of civility. As the interview reached its conclusion, Meghan delivered a final statement that carried the weight of absolute finality. "My children are royal," she said. "No test will change that." The words were not defensive or pleading, they were declarative, a statement of fact that she clearly believed required no further justification or explanation. At that moment, Meghan was not asking for the palace's acceptance or approval. She was asserting her children's right to their identity and heritage, regardless of what any document or laboratory result might say. The interview sent shockwaves through global media. News organizations devoted hours of coverage to analyzing every word, every gesture, every implication. Public opinion divided sharply, with some praising Meghan for her courage in confronting the institution directly, while others criticized her for airing private family matters in such a public forum. The debate raged across social media platforms, television programs, and newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic. Royal commentators found themselves in constant demand, appearing on morning shows, evening news programs, and late-night discussion panels to offer their perspectives on what the interview meant for the future of the monarchy. But just as the world was processing Meghan's explosive revelations, another development emerged that nobody had anticipated. A document surfaced that had the potential to reframe the entire scandal in a fundamentally different light. The discovery occurred at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish estate that had been one of Queen Elizabeth's favourite residences. A royal archivist working through the late Queen's personal effects as part of a routine cataloguing project came across an envelope that had been tucked inside a box containing some of Elizabeth's private memoirs and correspondence. The envelope was unmarked, with no label or official stamp to indicate its contents or intended recipient. The only identifying feature was a red wax seal bearing Queen Elizabeth's private signet, the kind she used for personal rather than official correspondence. Inside the envelope was a single page, handwritten but bearing no signature or date. The salutation read simply, "To whom it may concern," a phrase that suggested the letter was meant to be found and read at some future point, though when or by whom remained unclear. The content of the letter was brief but profound. In all matters concerning the line, it read, "What must endure is peace, not precision." Harry's legacy must be protected, regardless of biology, because his heart has never wavered. The words reflected a perspective that prioritized compassion and family bonds over strict adherence to bloodline verification. The letter was not a denial of the DNA controversy, nor was it a confirmation of any particular truth. Instead, it was a plea from a monarch, known for her restraint and dignity, asking that mercy and understanding prevail over judgment and division. The letter went on to acknowledge, in carefully chosen language, that Queen Elizabeth had been aware of growing tensions within the family long before the public became aware of them. "Some things were whispered that should have never left the shadows," she wrote, "but should they one day come to light, may mercy temper judgment." The phrasing was delicate but clear. Elizabeth knew that secrets existed, that conversations had taken place, and that the potential for scandal had been building beneath the surface for years. Her letter seemed to be an attempt to shape how those revelations would be received if they ever became public. Experts were immediately called in to verify the authenticity of the letter. The wax seal was examined and confirmed to be genuine, pressed with the stamp from Elizabeth's private desk. The paper was analysed and found to match the personal stationery stock that the Queen used for private correspondence. The handwriting was compared against known samples of Elizabeth's writing, with analysts concluding there was a 92% probability of a match. While the letter bore no signature, which might initially seem unusual, this was actually consistent with some of Elizabeth's personal notes, particularly those she may have written for herself or for discovery after her death, rather than for immediate delivery to a specific recipient. The impact of the letter's discovery was immediate and far-reaching. Within the palace, the reaction was reportedly one of shock and, for some members of the family, visible distress. Prince William was shown the letter during a private briefing with senior advisors, and according to sources familiar with the meeting, he walked out of the room without saying a word. Those present described his expression as one of profound confusion and emotional turmoil. The implications of his grandmother, reaching from beyond the grave to advocate for compassion over strict adherence to lineage, seemed to overwhelm him in a way that few other revelations had. King Charles, upon seeing the letter for himself, was said to have broken down emotionally. The realization that his mother had, in her final reflections, chosen to prioritize Harry's dignity and emotional well-being over questions of bloodline appeared to shake him profoundly. For a man who had spent his entire life preparing to be king, who understood the weight of tradition and the importance of lineage to the institution he now led, his mother's words presented a fundamental challenge to everything he had been taught to value. The public debate that followed the letter's leak was intense and multifaceted. Some people viewed it as a final act of grace from a queen who had spent her entire life balancing duty with compassion. These supporters argued that Elizabeth had witnessed firsthand the damage that rigid adherence to protocol and bloodline purity could cause, having lived through the difficulties faced by her sister Margaret, the scandals surrounding her own children's marriages, and the tragedy of Diana. In this interpretation, the letter represented the wisdom of a woman who had learned through decades of experience that family bonds and genuine love were more important than genetic certainty. Others interpreted the letter as a subtle but powerful rebuke of the very system she had spent 70 years upholding and defending. These critics suggested that Elizabeth was acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that the institution's obsession with bloodline and legitimacy could be destructive and dehumanizing when taken to extremes. Some even argued that the letter hinted at Elizabeth's own regrets about choices she had made or been forced to make during her reign, moments when duty had required her to prioritize institutional concerns over the happiness and well-being of individual family members. Regardless of how individual observers chose to interpret the letter, one thing was abundantly clear. Queen Elizabeth had reframed the scandal not as a question that demanded a definitive answer, but as a choice about what the monarchy valued more, the purity of bloodlines or the strength of family bonds. By doing so, she had shifted the entire moral foundation of the debate, making it impossible for anyone to claim the high ground simply by insisting on genetic verification. Yet even with the late Queen's voice entering the conversation and providing what many hoped would be a path toward resolution, the tension between the key figures in the scandal remained unresolved. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too fresh, and the institutional pressures too intense for one letter, however profound, to heal everything that had been broken.